Hi everyone, brand new patch for you to check out today. It's become one of my favourites. It's based on the Montreal recording, the new one that came out a couple of years ago, I suppose, so it's not that new. It's an interesting one because essentially all of the Brian May sounds all start with a Vox AC30 and a treble booster, and this one is the same. But I have a couple of other little tricks that I've been trying to get from listening to how the record was produced by comparing it to bootlegs from gigs that are from around that time and reading up on interviews. So it's going to get a bit geeky, so I'll just tell you what you've got so you can see how to get it to work, and if you want to see how I built it, just stay tuned and I'll talk through it. So first thing, what's in the pack? There's a couple of different versions of Amplitube 5. I've ran a survey. I found that some people have just the Brian May pack in the free version, some people have the medium regular Amplitube 5, and some people have Max. Some of the pieces that are in the version of this that I used to record are actually from the higher tiers, from Max and stuff, so I'll talk through why they're important. You can make a decision if you want them, but some of the other sets, presets, are just designed to work with the Brian May pack. Not quite as nice sounding as the ones that I've used in the mix and the songs, but they're there for you to play with. Okay, let's have a look at the screen and we'll see what's going on here. So in the first part, I have versions for people that use treble boosters that they have themselves, or the software treble booster, and it's simply a case of just selecting the one that you want to use yourself. For some of this recording, I'm using my own treble booster. I'll just give you a look at it. Actually, it's a really nice one. I got this one from Matt Netherwood in Yonder Busk Designs. Matt has a great trade in just building sort of replica electronics from Brian May's golden years, as they say. This one's really nice. It's period correct. In other words, this is something that he would have used from the 70s through to the 80s. Real nice treble booster. You don't necessarily need one of these. It's just I like to use this one because I'm used to how it behaves with the volume control for when I want to clean things up, and also it's very, very quiet, so it's not very noisy, which is nice when you're making a video. You can also use the software one, and if you are using the software one, I've set it up in 80s mode because that's the same type of sound, and you might try use the noise gate as well. So let's have a look and see what's in the chain. So once the guitar signal hits the treble booster, I have the option of a sort of treble enhancing graphic equalizer here. I just find that with some treble boosters, sometimes they get a benefit of when you roll back some of the bass, add in a little bit of treble, and it's kind of simulating something that I saw that was on Brian's pedal board from that time, which was a duplex treble booster. So in other words, he actually had two treble boosters in series at different times, and I think part of that was to roll some more bass off the signal before it hits the amp. After that, we have the phaser, and the phaser, probably the only modulation effect he was using at that time, and very soon afterwards he started using chorus. This is the Fox phaser. I've set the rate very low, feedback very low, and the range very low. So where you actually hear the phaser a lot actually is in the sort of the rhythm guitar and the solo and Play the Game. So it really just helps bring in a bit of scream in the sound. He doesn't use it too much in the gig after that. I think a bit on Flash and surprisingly not on We Will Rock You, but it's that Craig Farley actually has a really cool lesson on this actually that I reference in one of my other videos, but I'll stick a link into that as well. So there's the phaser. Now let's have a look at just the rest of the chain. I put a compressor in front of the amps, and the reason why I've done that is Brian was inclined to use a line driver on stage to cover for the length of cable that he had to use, and I think it sometimes affected the sound, and it's very hard to tell which songs had the benefit more than others, but it's something that's a very specific type of sound that you may want to have, and it's basically the sound of the preamp of the Voxes being absolutely pounded, but you can actually get a really sort of good take on that by enabling that. So I'm just leaving that there. So in terms of amps, I'm using two of the Brian May amps. In diMarco's video, he talks about how gainy they are. I completely agree. There is a bit of benefit from just turning the volume down on those, just to actually get a bit more of the harmonics to ring true. It's an interesting one though, because for the cabs, I'm not actually using the Brian May cabs from the set. So we'll just have a quick look at those. When you get the full version of Amplitube 5, there is a Vox amp contained in it. There's, I think it's called a Copperhead. Not quite as good for the primary stuff. It's nice for in a blend, as Marco's used in his preset. But where it is particularly useful is the cab that comes with it is actually very, very nice for that sort of 70s and early 80s Broadway type of sound. It comes with, I don't know what the speakers are actually when you load them up. I've changed the speakers in this one actually to Celestian Blues, and that gives it a bit more of a rounder sound. In terms of the microphone, I just have this good old condenser 67 on both of the amps, but in slightly different positions, but they're all off center. The SM57 here isn't engaged. So there is a bit of a magic trick though to making this work, because even though there's 2 amps in this, it's not a 2 amp setup in the traditional sense. When this was recorded, I think they probably only had the signal of 1 dry amp and then the 2 delay amps for the Brighton Rock solo. So what's happening here, I suppose, is more about it's more about using this amp as part of a sort of a texture trick to help fatten out the sound, and I'll show you how that works. So what I've done here is I'll have an EQ and a delay, and I'm just going to turn them off for a moment so you can hear what they sound like. So it's quite a usable sound. It's quite a usable sound. The thing about it is, though, it's not quite fat enough yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on this EQ, and what's happening with this EQ, it's accentuating the low and the lower mids. And I'll tell you why I'm doing that. When I was doing my research for this tone, I came across an interview with Justin Shirley Smith and Joshua McRae, who work with Queen in managing their back catalogue and recording their newer material. And you know, it's something I knew about before, but I didn't realise how prevalent it was. But almost always when Brian records a Vox, he has a mic in front of it, a dynamic mic 421, and he has an SM57 in the rear of the cab. And that's really interesting, because when you blend those 2 signals, the rear sound kind of softens the sound of the first microphone and gives a bit more warmth and bass to the signal. And on stage, I don't think they recorded that, but it was added back in through a bit of trickery, and this is my way of sort of bringing that trickery into it, or that extra warmth. So on the top cab, this EQ, as I say, it's boosting sort of the lower mid and some of the low signal, not the subs, just stuff from 80 Hertz to about, you know, 300 Hertz. And I have a delay. And what the delay is doing is it's stopping that amp from being heard for about 12 milliseconds after the first amp, and that thickens up the sound. So I'll just show you what it does. So this is the sound of both of them on, and this is with them off. Just to fatten it up and give it a sort of a nice sort of a bit of a live feel to it. So there it is, back on again. So we'll just progress further down the chain. Next I have another equalizer, and this equalizer is one that I would put on any mic'd cab in real life. If I had a real hardware one, I'd probably just leave it permanently set like this. And what this does is it manages the bass and the treble. So the low subs I'm not really interested in too much, so anything below 40 Hertz I just tend to kind of take out, as you can see here at the screen. The mids, I just do a little bit of shape tricking with that if I need to sometimes, but on the high end I take off a lot of the frequencies above 10k, because guitar doesn't really live there. What does live there is noise. So if we're not going to be causing any sort of wrestling matches between the cymbals and all the other instruments that need that space, I tend to just knock it out. Okay, so this one is the Brighton Rock delay, and it's got the 2 repeats at 800 and 1600 milliseconds for all that. Another delay, and it's an interesting one. When you listen to bootlegs from that time, there's not really any delay on stage, but when the album was mixed, there is a bit of sort of ambient delay added to a lot of the lead sound. So I mean, like, you can kind of hear that in some of the examples I played. You know, it's sort of like gives a nice little bit of ambience. Everybody likes a little bit of delay in their solos. Now, the last piece is an interesting one, because this is one that you only usually get in Amplitube Max, but you can also buy separately. And if there's one thing in Amplitube Max that I recommend that every guitarist has, it's this one. It's the EQ81. And what this is, this is a channel from a Neve mixing console. it's really a very musical type of compressor EQ hybrid, if you like. And going back to that interview with Justin Shirley Smith and Joshua McRae, it's a channel strip that they would use a lot in processing Brian sound, and probably was in place in a lot of the studios that they worked in before. It's something I'll just knock off for a minute. Actually, you can hear what it does. So this is just with a flat signal without the EQ 81 engaged. And this is with it back on. So what this is doing is I've boosted the input a little bit, and that causes it to compress the signal a little bit, but in a nice sort of musical kind of way, which is great. But there's a parametric EQ that I've tweaked. Now, this is just another interesting point as well. If you have this particular channel and you start using a preset with different speakers or different headphones, this is a very quick way of tuning the sound. The presets will sound different on different devices, different speakers and stuff, and even different volumes, due to a thing called the Fletcher-Munson effect. So in other words, when sound gets louder, it doesn't get louder proportionately. The bass can become a little bit over present, and the higher frequencies can become a little bit shrill. So, you know, in order to adapt this for your own setup, an EQ like this is nearly a must, because if the bass is too boomy or if the high is too shrill, you can just dial them back very quickly. In some of the variants of the presets that I've put in there, I've used just a standard graphic EQ to try and tune it, so you can get away with a decent sound without this particular piece of gear. But if you have a variant of or variety of Amplitube 5 that has no equalization in it, you really need to upgrade. It's just so important for getting a good sound out of your chain. Things will be very flat without it. So that's how the preset works. You can hear what it does. I'd love for you to have a go of it. I'd love you to tell me how you find it to work. If you have a way of improving it, I really want to hear it. It's definitely a good basis for a lot of the studio stuff that happened around that time too. And it's something that I'll probably use to do a few more recordings from that period too as well soon. Coming up later, I'm going to do a video about Amplitube for beginners. So if a lot of this stuff has gone over your head, this will kind of help you sort of get used to all of the terminology and the technology involved. And as always, please subscribe. Your subscription means I might eventually get paid for all of this and become an influencer and famous or something. Stay tuned, and I'll talk to you soon.